Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Thursday's episode of Trending, brought to you by Iconic Coffee. Head over to shop.iconic.com and use the code TRENDING for 10% off. Well, the Russians are back, Gaz, aren't they, mate?
Don't think they ever left, did they?
Nope, they're to blame for absolutely everything. So there's another one on the list this morning, which we'll dive into now.
This is from The Sun, which means it must be true. It starts with a pun, because it's The Sun, so it has to start with a pun. From Russia with shove. I don't even know what that means.
Yeah, what does that mean?
To be honest, it rhymes with love. That's about it. Britain's migrant crisis being fueled by Putin's Russia and other hostile states in secret plot to destabilise the UK. I mean, you want to laugh, but there'll be people that believe this.
Yeah, exactly. That's the terrifying part of it.
Russia is pushing migrants to the UK to overwhelm border defences and sow division, security sources warn. Vladimir Putin's tactic include providing fake documents, transport and even military escorts to smuggling gangs. More than 18,000 have arrived in dinghies so far this year, and opposition MPs said the crossing should now be declared a national security crisis. Well, it should be, but opposition MPs did sod all about it for the whole entire time they were in power.
14 years, yeah.
Senior security sources warned The Sun, because that's what you do if you're a security forces, you go straight to The Sun. They warned The Sun that foreign powers are backing or exploiting smuggling gangs in a bid to destabilise Britain. All right, well, let's put this into context then. So it wasn't Tony Blair that opened the borders in the late 90s after he came to power in 1997. It wasn't Tony Blair that joined George W. Bush in decimating the Middle East, creating a mass exodus and mass immigration. It wasn't the EU, while we were still in the EU, as if we ever left really, insisting that we took our fair share of migrants. It wasn't David Cameron helping to overthrow Gaddafi in Libya, which created a hellscape of slave markets and starvation. It wasn't Cameron and May that helped destroy Syria, creating again a mass exodus. It wasn't Boris Johnson that sabotaged peace talks in Ukraine, leading to that war going on and on and on and on as it still is, which again created a huge influx of Ukrainian refugees into Europe and in particular into the UK. It wasn't subsequent governments incentivizing mass immigration by providing hotels, mobile phones and financial assistance to lads, let's have it right, it's not women and children, to lads coming over the channel. No, it was none of these things. It was Vladimir Putin and the Russians. And the reason it was the Russians is because we want to go to war with the Russians, but we need to get your consent. We need to manufacture your consent. So that's why none of what I've said there matters. It was all the Russians.
It's much easier to explain, isn't it?
Much easier.
And there's absolutely no coincidence that this story's broken on the week that there's been talks of World War III, the weeks that all the NATO countries have committed to spending 5% GDP to counter Russian threat. Absolutely no coincidence. This is just completely organic. It's laughable, mate. It's absolutely laughable. And what it's done is it's two aspects to it. One, it's created a further demonisation of Russia among idiots that will believe this. And what it's also done is it's relinquished any responsibility, as you pointed out, for governments previously and the current government to solve the problem. Because it's, well, how are we going to compete? We've got a state that are trying to cause chaos. So therefore, it's happening as a result of other people. It's not happening as a result of our policies, which we all know it's happening as a result of policy. If you wanted to stop border crossings, you could stop them in 5 minutes. Literally stop them in 5 minutes. Really simple. Put a naval blockade across. Yeah, of course. Very, very easy. You don't need to spend billions sending money to France to patrol beaches that they're not doing. You don't need to spend millions on the Rwanda scheme, which they obviously scrapped, to send migrants to Rwanda. You don't need to do that. You just need to stop them coming into the country, which you can do very simply. Same in America. You can apply this to any border crisis. And it really does make me laugh, this story, that you've got talks about 5% being spent on the military to protect the borders when you can't protect the border. How are you protecting the border against a nuclear missile, but you can't protect it against a dinghy? Please explain that to me. That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And if you were genuinely trying to protect your borders, you would protect your borders to the point that you knew exactly who was coming in and coming out of them. That should be point one, not building and buying planes that can carry nuclear bombs. That makes absolutely no sense. Unless the agenda is exactly what it is.
They won't stop missiles anyway.
No, they won't.
They don't care. The country's being destroyed and undermined. That bit of the story is true. It's just not being done by the Russians.
No. 100%.
And if the Russians did throw a missile, it'd have a job at Uber Eats within about 20 minutes anyway. Do you know what I mean? It's a joke, mate. We're honestly, we're a banana republic. We're a joke state. You know, people. That's what I said in a tweet yesterday. It's like the great in Great Britain is doing some heavy lifting.
Very much so. Very much
doing
so.
some heavy lifting now.
People have spoken about it in America over the last few years. Is if you can destroy any sense of national pride, any sense of kind of nationhood, if you like, it just destroys people's psychology, which is what we're seeing. Now people are embarrassed of what's going on in the country. And as a result, you're less likely to stand up against it because you just see it going, and that's what's happening. A lot of people are leaving the country, moving abroad, saying that it's gone and it's too late and it's just left to the dogs, and that's exactly what they want, because then there's no resistance to further events like this to destroy it even more.
I found that, just quickly, Jay, I don't know if I told you this, I think maybe I even said it on Trending. I'm getting old and senile, but when I was in Mexico, Acapulco, earlier in the year, in January, that question was asked to me so many times.
Yep.
When are you coming? So when are you and your family leaving then? And when I said, well, I'm not going anywhere, mate. I'm an Englishman, and I would like to stay and fight. The people were like, what?
Yeah, I know. See, I sit on the fence. I'd move, I think.
I'm an Englishman, mate.
In New York.
I was born here and I'll die here.
Jeez. Get your Union Jack flag out in a minute.
No, I don't have any love for the state, and I don't have any love for the flag and all that nonsense, but I have love for these lands. Absolutely.
Oh yeah, I agree. I look at it from this perspective. I don't feel like a nationalist, but I feel very fortunate to have been born here, given where you could have been born in terms of the opportunities being born in a country like this has given me that it wouldn't have been if I'd have been born somewhere else. Look at it from that perspective. Right, we're going to move to one of the key figures trying to destroy the country, or just pick up from where the Conservatives left it. Starmer's team asked Labour MPs to remove their names from a rebel amendment bill that could bring down this welfare bill. Now, this welfare bill is very controversial because it does essentially exactly the opposite of what the Labour Party should stand for, which is it actually attacks vulnerable people and attacks people that need support. Which, if you look at how the Labour Party was founded, it was meant to be the party of the people, the party of workers, the party that supported more sort of socialist and left-wing policies. It's not been that since 1997 when Blair won, but it's certainly not that anymore. Starmer is just as right of centre as the Tories, probably more so in many ways, actually. But basically this bill, because when you have that many MPs, over 400, there is going to be some MPs in that are still of the old Labour mindset, and that's obviously going to be the case. But this bill has caused a massive stir within a large proportion of them. Nearly a quarter of them are talking about voting against this bill, which would make it very difficult, unless the bill got support from the other side of the House and the Conservatives, it would make it very difficult for them to get it through. Now, Starmer has dealt with rebels, if you like, people who have voted against his policies in the Labour Party very strongly, hasn't he, so far? He just gets rid of them because he's been able to, because there's been a handful here and there, and when you have a majority of about 90 or something, you could afford to lose a few people. He can't afford to lose this because he loses the bill, and also then you've got a quarter of the party that don't want him as leader anymore, and it makes his position very, very untenable. So essentially what he's trying to do is appease that, because he's meant to be here for the long haul, isn't he? He's clearly the chosen one. You could see that a few years ago. He's clearly the one that they want to bring this agenda through. So I don't feel, unless there's another thing at play here, they're going to let him take such a big defeat to the point that his leadership is going to be challenged. Maybe, could be completely wrong. Any of you that watched Prime Minister's Questions yesterday and watched Angela Rayner sitting in for him, I'm not sure there's a leader there. Jeez. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens here, whether they back down on the bill like they have done with the fuel payments, whether they back down with that, or whether they essentially just go for it, or whether they kick people out. It'll be interesting to see what happens, because it all depends what the outcome they want is. Yeah. It all depends on that. If they want Starmer gone, they'll let him lose the bill, because he is the most unpopular Prime Minister in history, the most unpopular government in their first year in history. So maybe him going is something they might think, actually, we need him gone, because if he's the face and the poster boy for the policies we want to get through over the next 4 years, we're going to have a real problem. So we need a fresh face. Yeah,
they do rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic from time to time. Like I say, it doesn't matter who comes in anyway, that there'll be a cult operative. For whatever people think about Jeremy Corbyn, and I'm not skinning the game for Corbyn, and there's lots of things I massively disagree with him on. I can't be doing with the gender pronoun nonsense for a start, but at the same time, he was an anti-war candidate. He is genuinely anti-war, and as much as we were fed in the election when Boris Johnson beat him, we were fed that if Corbyn comes in, it's going to be carnage, we're going to end up going to war, which is complete inversion. Actually, if Corbyn had been Prime Minister, we wouldn't be having this Russian nonsense for a start.
No, we wouldn't.
We wouldn't be having this Iranian nonsense and sending all this money, and we'll come to in a later story, military support to Israel to carry out a genocide. You wouldn't be having any of that under Corbyn. But Corbyn needed to be gotten rid of because we can't have anti-war people. So Starmer was clearly the chosen one for 100%. That. They completely destroyed Corbyn. Morgan McSweeney played a large part in that and was rewarded with a job as chief of staff in the current government. He put Starmer in position, and you can see he's a chosen one as well, in the sense that all this nonsense with the Ukrainian male escorts and setting fire to all his stuff being completely buried by the UK media, that would have been massively exploited if he wasn't the chosen one.
Well, we said this previously about Boris Johnson, didn't we? When Boris Johnson said all those things in public about Muslim women looking like letterboxes, X, Y, and Z, and it basically went nowhere. You made the point at the time, if Corbyn had said that, that would have been the end of it.
It would have been the end.
So the fact that that was almost buried and it was laughed off and shrugged off, you could tell that Johnson was clearly the chosen one for that particular period.
Oh, yeah.
And you could apply the same logic to this now.
Well, it was obvious that Starmer was the chosen one before the election with Sunak. Sunak knew it and he wasn't even trying anyway, as head of the Conservative Party. But if you go back in time and you have 4 Ukrainian male models, male escorts, setting fire to a bunch of Sunak stuff, don't tell me that wouldn't have been front page news everywhere, with everyone going, what's his contact? Does he know these men? Does he have a personal history with these? None of these questions have been asked by the media.
How did they all know where he lived?
Exactly. None of these questions were asked with Starmer because Starmer's the chosen one. That said, you can be flavour of the month and not be flavour of the month next month.
Oh, yeah.
So you might be right. Once he gets to a point where they go, okay, he's taken us as far as he can, we ain't going to be able to push this over the line if it's his name on the tin. Because that's exactly what they did with Tony Blair.
100%.
Tony Blair was so hated, they went, we're going to have to get him out now. See, they brought in Brown, who arguably in some people's minds was worse. He sold off all the British wealth, the gold, the tangible, real wealth that Britain had as a country, having not been elected. But yeah, that could happen, mate.
It could, because ultimately these are just pawns. Starmer's a pawn. He's not a leader. He's a pawn. He's somebody who's having his strings pulled from behind. And once you get to the point that you're no longer of a positive influence for them, they'll just bring somebody else in. That's what they do. That's why if you look at Tony Blair, in a sense, left in disgrace, but he's done all right since, hasn't he? He still gets 6-figure income for certain speeches. He's still being very well looked after because he did his job as far as the cult's concerned. He did what they wanted him to do. So him leaving in disgrace, in the sense of the hatred that British public had towards him and still do, not bothered about that because he did his job as far as they're concerned. If Starmer gets to the end of these 5 years, if he lasts that long, gets voted out, which almost certainly would happen, gets voted out, then again, he might be hated by the British public, but in terms of the agenda, he'll have done his job and he'll be very, very well rewarded.
Oh yeah,
so whatever
his
happens,
book deal and his job at the World Economic Forum. Yeah,
100%. Well, he likes it more than Westminster anyway.
Well, Tony Blair, this was the ultimate. I mean, we say it all the time when you look at certain stories, things that are happening. Like for instance, when Labour came out and said we're bringing bills down, we've done this, we've done that. When all the opposite things were true, I think there was about 8 things they listed, and literally everyone was provably incorrect. That was trolling, and everyone on social media was going, mate, they are trolling, aren't they? Yeah, they are. It's about demoralisation.
Yep.
When Tony Blair left in disgrace after what happened in Iraq, he was made Middle East peace envoy.
Yeah.
That's trolling, ladies and gentlemen.
It certainly is. There's a lot of that these days.
Absolutely. Now, this story is from a journalist called Craig Murray. Some of you might know him. He's very good. He's very, very good on the Middle East. He's very anti-war. Now, this, I saw David Curtin actually shared this yesterday evening. Heritage Party founder David Curtin shared this. And I follow Craig Murray, but Craig Murray is one of those guys, which I think you'll find is the same with yourself, myself, Dad, Rich, all of us really, is there's lots of people that follow you, but they don't see your stuff. Same with Craig Murray. So I actually didn't see this article until David Curtin shared it. And I was like, how did I miss that? Well, because X, the freedom of speech platform, didn't want to show it me.
You're not suggesting that the freedom of speech hero shadow bans, are you?
Freedom of speech, not freedom of reach, Jay.
Of course, lawful but awful.
Dystopia UK, genocidal RAF squadron targeted by Palestine action is owned by a hedge fund. If you thought RAF jets were owned by the RAF, think again. The RAF squadron targeted for a repaint by Palestine Action due to its involvement in supplying Israel's genocide does not in fact belong to the RAF at all. It belongs to ultimately the Polygon Global Partners LLP, a hedge fund. Through a chain of 7 cutout companies, because that's how they do it, that's how they try and hide it. Lots of these organisations are owned by people that you don't realise they're owned by, which I will take you through. The direct ownership is with Air Tanker Limited, which gives its address as RAF Bryce Norton. Now, this is the RAF base where this vandalism was carried out. We were told that the RAF had its planes damaged. There were graffitied and stuff like that. It was made to be like this massive national scandal best part of a week ago. Well, they don't actually belong to the RAF at all. Now, this is the bit that I think is significant. Note that Air Tanker Limited states that 5 of the Voyager aircraft, these are the ones that were spray painted, while being available to the RAF, can also be made available to other parties. This can include providing military capability to other nations. So Craig asked the question whether the aircraft was being operated by the RAF on behalf of the Israelis or whether they've been provided to the Israelis is an interesting question. Is it designed to provide a plausible deniability for the UK government? That's a very good question. Because the UK government, after the strikes in Iran as well, which obviously America carried out alongside the Israelis, David Lammy, the 10-watt light bulb, the ignoramus that is David Lammy, came out immediately and said we had no involvement in it. And it was almost like he said it in such a way that it's like if your partner comes home after a night out and you go, "Hey, darling, did you have a good night?" And she goes, "I didn't cheat on you." You go,
"Well, you did then."
Well, I didn't ask, but the fact you've said that makes me think otherwise. The fact that Lammy came out straight away and said we weren't involved in it makes me think you probably were, son. So this is my takeaway from it, because Palestine Action, this is a group of activists that have now been designated a terror organisation by the UK government as a result of this. They've actually done the British public a bit of a favour, really, because what they've done is they've shown it to be an absolute nonsense. They've shown the fact that the RAF, the British military, doesn't actually own any of its hardware, or certainly doesn't own this chunk of its hardware. Yep. It's owned by a hedge fund that could hand it to someone else tomorrow.
Yeah.
That's mental. And it also begs the question, if it's owned by a hedge fund, what's all this 5% of GDP? Why is all this money being taken in council tax and all these other hidden taxes that we get charged to go and fund the military to protect us from the Iranians or the Russians or frogs from space? Well, it's not buying this because it's owned by a hedge fund.
Yep.
And the other thing, which I actually said at the time, got a bit of ear roll grief for it, but I do like a bit of ear roll grief every now and then, is actually they've done us a favour because they've shown that, in fact, we don't have any security. Because this is a gang of activists that are obviously looking at the fact that the RAF, the hedge fund, is assisting the Israelis in committing a genocide. They're against the genocide. They've been asking for however many years now, best part of 70, can we stop this killing of Palestinians, please? Can we stop it, please? Can we stop it, please? Can we stop it, please? Nothing. Oh, we're a democracy. Oh, okay, let's vote for a different party. What party do I vote for now that's going to stop the genocide? None of them, because they're all Israel firsters, every single one of them. Even Reform, the alternative Reform, the Reform that's so alternative it votes for infanticide and votes for the assisted dying bill, and now wants ID cards. So they get to the point where they go, okay, well, I'm just going to take it into my own hands then. I'm going to commit some vandalism, right? Agree with it or don't agree with it. If activists can get into an RAF base to vandalise aeroplanes, what can undercover operatives of foreign nations do?
What missiles going to do, like we said earlier?
Well,
where's your defence?
Think about it. These are just going to be a load of people that are activists that just, well, we'll probably get told they're Russian, actually, then when we realise that.
Or Iranians.
Yeah, but this is the point, isn't it? If, say we are at war with Russia, or say we are at war with Iran or North Korea or whoever else we're supposed to be at war with, if these activists can get into an RAF base, these buggers can.
Yeah, no,
and then
100%.
And they won't just graffiti the planes, will they?
No, 100%. I think this shows a number. So many different ways you could look at this. The money aspect you mentioned, you could look at it from this perspective, that the amount of money across government departments that's wasted on stuff that either doesn't need to happen, goes into third-party pockets. Lack of efficiency is insane. I mean, I dread to think if you add that number together. I've got a neighbour of mine who works on HS2, right? And he tells me some stories every now and again about the amount of money that's wasted, that they'll get sent somewhere for the day and there's actually no work for them, but that's all coming out of the taxpayers' money. They're still getting, it's just insane. I dread to think how much more that will be in the military because of the amount of people taking things out. So of that 5%, or whatever it is now, how much is actually going to go on defence versus going to third parties like they're talking about here? I'd say it's probably the majority actually rather than the minority, because actual military personnel, particularly your bread and butter soldiers, don't get paid very well at all. So it's all going into people's pockets. So there's one aspect to it.
Well, money laundering is another aspect.
Money laundering is a huge aspect to it. I've actually flown on an air tanker plane back from New York. They leased it because I was meant to fly.
The hedge fund.
Yeah, I was meant to fly back from with Thomas Cook. Me and Gina were, and the Thomas Cook plane had a crash at Manchester Airport. It drove into a what's it called, like a lamp or something, and the wing was damaged. So they leased an air tanker one to use it. I was terrified. It was horrible.
Well, I would be. I'm hoping it wasn't the same pilot that drove the plane into a lamppost.
No, ideally not. So there's so many different ways that you can look at this. I think we spoke a few weeks ago, didn't we, about the plans to demonise any support for the Palestinians more so, and that Free Palestine was going to be the new Allah Akbar and so on. And this ties into that as well. So there's another angle to look at it, that it's going to give them more justification in the minds of people to further crack down and to dilute that sympathy for what the Palestinians are facing, because terrorist organisations, Palestine Action, that's, now it's a terrorist organisation that creates a connection in people's minds between support for Palestine and terrorism. So there's lots of different factions and lots of different aspects to this, but all of them are detrimental to us, absolutely. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens from here with the way any support for Palestine is dealt with, is observed in the public domain. And it'll be also interesting to see now what happens with RAF in terms of surveillance, in terms of security, because they will obviously again use this as a justification for further money on security, I would expect. Yeah. Which is going to be further probably money coming out of our pockets.
And digital IDs.
And digital IDs, exactly. We've got to know who these people are. There's so many different angles. That's the thing. You look at a news story and you can look at it from one angle and go, oh, that means that. There's always 2, 3, 4, 5 different angles and different perspectives on the same story that cover so many different areas. And it's really, really interesting to observe how most people just see the headline and then that's it. And there's so much more to unpack. That's what we try and do here.
Well, digital ID,
every morning.
Number one, it's the hill to die on.
100%.
100%. The other thing is that actually you can look at every single story we've covered today, and even the one we're about to cover, and you can throw the call for ID cards into
Solve them
it.
all, yeah.
I mean, the mass immigration for a start. I mean, we spoke about this months ago, the fact that they were going to use mass immigration. I was about to say they facilitated. No, it was the Russians, wasn't it?
No, of course, yeah, exactly.
It was the Russians. The mass immigration, that they were going to use it to justify ID cards. And then within a week, there was a news story where I think it was 7 Labour MPs came out and just had a little idea, what about this? As if they just come up with it. Now it's everywhere, cross-party.
The Britannia card.
The Britannia card, the Brit card, I don't know.
Embarrassing. Right, so final story. This will shock you. Taskforce launched to tackle the root of the UK riots, tackle the root cause of the UK riots. An independent, which is whenever you see the word independent commission, it never means independent. An independent commission aimed at tackling community divisions across Britain in the aftermath of last summer's riots will hold its first meeting on Wednesday. The cross-party body, again, that's always a big red flag, cross-party, led by former Tory Home Secretary Sajid Javid and Labour MP John Crudas, says this will examine what Prime Minister Keir Starmer last year called cracks in our foundation and support from across the political spectrum. So again, it has support from across the House, because when it comes to the important issues, they're all on the same page. Rhetoric may change slightly, but they're all on the same page when it comes to what they actually support. As I said the other day, when that video circulated of Trump saying that he was angry with Israel, angry with Iran, I remember tweeting going, it's easy to say those things, but look at the actions, because the actions will completely contradict the words. And we see politicians say things and then do exact opposite. How many examples do you want from this year, let alone from history, of a politician saying something, whether they support something, don't support something, going to do something, not going to do something, and then the polar opposite happens in a very short period. So the fact that this has support from across the entire House is already a red flag. in terms of what it's going to uncover. Now, if you were genuinely trying to look and go, right, there is division in the UK, not trying to pretend there isn't. There's massive division in the UK. But if you were trying to genuinely look at what the cause of that is, you would start by looking at yourselves as a government and go, what have we done to sow that division? What has been done over the last 25, 30 years to sow that division? Who have we ignored? Who have we marginalised? Who have we prioritised? What are people in the communities where these riots happening and this civil unrest is happening? What are their concerns? How have their lives changed over the period of the last 30 odd years? Have they got better? Have they got more money? Have they got less money? Are the streets safer? Are the schools better? Is the healthcare system better? Is transport better? And the answer to all those questions is no. Everything has got worse. Unless you are in that elite level where you're not worrying about your bills and not worrying about your money, and a lot of people that thought they were in that level 10 years ago aren't anymore, you can see all the problems that this country has. And all of them come back, or most of them come back, to government policy ultimately. The streets not being safe, for example, which is a big concern for many people. That is a direct result of government policy for the last 30 years. If you look at the cost of living, people struggling just to make ends meet, that is a direct result of government policy over the last 20 to 30 years. And you look at immigration, which is again another massive, massive factor, which ties into both those two I've just mentioned, safety and cost of living. It's something that's been ignored and ignored and ignored. And it's like you said with that last story, Gaz, if you highlight a problem and you point it out and you're ignored and you're ignored and you're ignored, eventually you're going to take it into your own hands. If you're at school and someone's bullying you, you tell the teacher, nothing happens. They keep bullying you, you tell the teacher again, nothing happens. Eventually you're just going to hit them back yourself. You're going to deal with it on your own because you don't feel that there is anybody there to help you unless you deal with it yourself. That's what the riots were. Now, I don't condone riots. I don't believe violence is the answer. Very, very, very small examples where I would say violence is the answer. If someone hits you in the face, you're going to hit them back. But when it comes to mass violence like that, I don't agree with that. However, that is a direct result of ignoring genuine concerns of people for decades. They're going to ignore that in this inquiry, and they're going to focus on a few issues which will target the likes of us and the likes of you watching this, which will be conspiracy theorists. The fact that there was so many rumours about that attack led to anger, led to misinformation, led to this, led to that. Well, as we spoke about at the time, that was massively amplified by the lack of information coming out about it. And people putting forward genuine concerns and genuine information and being told they were racist or conspiracy theorists when actually it turned out to be true. Big one. Which is going to then lead them back to this online harms bill, which has kind of gone quiet now, isn't it?
Well, it's passed.
But
so it's just sat waiting to be implemented.
Yeah, and this will give them the opportunity to further implement that and to further probably add to that over the years. The likes of Ofcom will have further powers over the internet, more so than they have already. Social media crackdowns, all of those things will be used, and probably, I would expect as well, some third-party state involvement, they will say, whether that be from the Russians, whether that be from countries in the Middle East, they will say sowed this division because it benefits them. None of those are getting to the root of the problem because they don't want to get to the root of the problem. They just want to marginalise and silence people pointing out the problem.
Well, they don't care about online misinformation either. No. They I mean, you're right. We could basically stop now and just go, don't worry about the Taskforce. Save the money that you're going to invest in this Taskforce. Sajid, Javid, go back to the golf course, son. Just be careful no one confuses your head with a golf ball. It will be the Russians, it will be conspiracy theorists, and it will be online misinformation. That's what the Taskforce will find was the root cause of the UK riots. Simple as that. Open and closed. They won't tackle the online misinformation of people not like Nick Lowles of Hope Not Hate, who was out there saying that white guys were chucking acid in the face of Muslim women, which never happened.
No.
Literally never happened. And the police came out immediately and said, that didn't happen, that this didn't, what? But that led to large groups of Muslims, Muslim men, taken to the streets. And I can, I don't like rioting, but I can understand why. If you feel like you're a marginalised group, as a lot of Muslims do, a lot of Muslims feel like they're victims of Islamophobia, and you suddenly find out from Nick Lowles, not to be confused with Nick Knowles, Nick Lowles, who obviously is the bastion of truth at Hope Not Hate, that one of your own essentially is having far right thugs chucking acid in her face, would you take to the streets? A lot of people
Probably,
would.
yeah.
I think if you put it in reverse and you say a gang of Muslim guys chucked acid in the face of white British women, don't tell me you wouldn't be taken to the streets, ladies and gentlemen. Of course you would. And that's why they said it, because they wanted to create the division. And then what happens when it was provably bollocks? Nothing happened to Hope Not Hate, and nothing happened to Nick Lowles. He just skulked away like a feral little rat that he is.
While Lucy Connolly's still in prison.
Exactly, for a tweet. But there you go. What I find interesting as well, though, is that riots, I don't agree with riots either, but they are commonly referred to as riots are the voice of the unheard. Unless it's white British people doing it.
Yeah, 100%.
Then it changes.
Yeah. The way that you can always tell whether a riot is for the benefit of the agenda or against it by the media coverage. Like we saw the riots a few weeks ago in LA, and the media coverage of it was all anti Trump's reaction. It wasn't about the riots. It was about his reaction to it. It wasn't about the fact there was looting. BLM, massive example. BLM, that was all brilliant. Even though there's so many videos of people looting shops, how does that help racism? Again, doesn't, does it? Yeah, I don't see any videos of anyone looting shops. I certainly didn't see anyone looting shops during the COVID protests. Yet people were beaten the hell out of. Old women were targeted and attacked. Yeah. People were arrested. It was absolutely disgraceful. And the media coverage was, you're idiots, you're demonised, you're this, you're that. It's clear that it's not about... we say constantly on this show, if you've got to look at who's doing something before deciding whether you support or oppose it, you kind of lost the plot, because that's a subjective perspective rather than objective. Just that's wrong, that's right. And you can see the same with the way that the system operates and the way the media operate. BLM, brilliant. Anti-lockdown, not good. Same things. Actually, the anti-lockdown protest, there wasn't violence. There wasn't people looting, like I've said. There wasn't people setting fire to things. Yet that was portrayed as bad. These riots were good because it was a cause that they were happy to sow, in the sense of they're happy for there to be division like that. The COVID protest was actually about unity. Very few protests are about unity, but they attack the ones that are. And this is another good example. This protest against what happened in Southport and what followed, the cause of it and the anger within people was coming from a place that was justified, I would suggest. The riots, the violence, absolutely isn't justified. However, the feeling of injustice that people had, that is something that is, I think, very much justified in this country for so many different reasons. You can't keep people pinned down for as long as they have across a range of different issues. Tell people they're useless, they're racist, they're this, they're that, and the other, and then tell them they're wrong, when then things are being proven that show that you're right, and you're getting no, hang on, guys, I'm telling what we're saying is true. Look at the street. You're just ignored. You can't do that without eventually people, kicking off. And a lot of times, as you know, when people finally have had enough and finally lose their mind, finally lose it with an issue, you don't always act in the best way, because you've lost it. You've lost that rationale. You're that angry. And I'm not justifying what happened whatsoever, but I'm making the point that they knew that was going to happen, and they know it will happen again.
They want it to happen.
Your one catalysing event, I would say, like Southport, from something like this in this country, I'd say 365, 7 days a week.
Yeah, they want it to happen. And, I didn't see Keir Starmer taking a knee with his welder's mask on when Southport happened, when the 3 girls were killed in Southport, like he did for George Floyd. Because like you said, it's this one, that works. I can use that. That one, I'm not so bothered. It's like we've said before. It's not what's being done. It's who it's being done by, and it's not what's being said. It's who it's being said by.
Absolutely. There's just a final point on this. There's a few interesting names as well to chuck in that are on this commission. Caroline Lucas, the former Green Party leader, an MP for down in Brighton, and also the husband of Joe Cox, the former MP Joe Cox, who was murdered in her constituency a few years ago.
Oh, Brendan Cox.
Yeah. So there's a lot. Is
he not being accused of being inappropriate sexual stuff anymore then?
So there's a lot, I don't know too much about that one. There's a lot of people who you would kind of expect to certainly look at the online aspect of this. Caroline Lucas, about as woke as you can get. Anyone that says anything she doesn't agree with is an extremist. Obviously, Brendan Cox has spoken a lot about countering extremism online, because they say that's what led to the murder of Joe Cox, when there's probably almost certainly a lot more to know about that.
Absolutely.
So all those names, we know where this inquiry is going to go. It's only going to go one way, and it's going to be targeting the likes of us, the likes of you watching this, for pointing out what's actually happening in the world. Yeah. Certainly what's happening in this country. Right, that's us, mate.
Yeah, so that's us, mate. Rich is back tomorrow on his Todd. But until then, we'll see you later. Head over to shop.iconic.com. Use the code training. You get 10% off Iconic coffee.
We'll be back on Monday, mate.
Yes, mate. Take care.
Take care. Bye.